Hello and welcome to the World Wanderers podcast, your source for travel stories, travel destinations, and travel philosophy.
I'm Amanda.
I'm Ryan.
And we're your hosts. Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of the World Wanderers podcast. This episode of the podcast is brought to you by you, the listener of the show. People who are a part of our Patreon community pay us a small amount each month, something less than one latte, and in return they get fun gifts and giveaways such as copies of all of our ebooks, postcards from exotic places in the world, and one-on-one hangouts with us. So if you're interested in becoming a part of our elite community and helping out the ongoing production of the podcast, you can go to www.theworldwanderers.com/Patreon and join our community today. And thanks in advance for your support. So on to today's episode, we have a guest who we had on last year, Justin Greak. Justin started as a listener of the show. He quickly became a friend of ours, and we found his story so inspiring that we wanted to chat with him. And so the last time we chatted with Justin, he was living in Houston, Texas. He was balancing a full-time job as a teacher with his love of travel. And since we talked to Justin in pretty much this time last year, he has actually made the move to Sweden. So Justin is here today to talk to us about what the process of moving his life abroad has been like, the challenges, the highs, the lows, the exciting aspects, and what life in Sweden has been like because he's been there for a couple months now. And so without further ado, here's Justin.
All right, we are very excited today to have Justin Greak returning to the podcast. If you remember, just over a year ago, Justin was on the show and he was talking about how he balances being a teacher with his love of travel and how he kind of mixes a full-time life in the States with a lot of adventures abroad. And Justin's life has taken a big turn since the last time we talked. He is actually joining us from Sweden, where he works as a teacher now. So this year's annual Where in the World is Justin episode is happening from Sweden. Thanks for joining us today, Justin.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
So I guess to start off with, where did the idea of teaching abroad start? When did you first kind of start thinking, oh, maybe I could apply for jobs outside the U.S.?
I don't know if I can pinpoint one specific thing. It's probably a combination of many things, I would say. When I was younger, I was always obsessed with like maps. And I was always just like studying maps and it's like, oh, I'm going to live here one day. Or, I always had like a new place of the week. Like, oh, when I grow up, I'm going to live in Louisiana. Now I'm going to live in Alaska. Now I'm going to live in France. So, I always knew that I wanted to like go somewhere else. And then when I was in 7th grade, I had a teacher. And he ended up leaving in the middle of the school year. He ended up getting a job in Poland to teach. So he left us and he would write us letters. We'd write him letters. He'd send us pictures and everything. And I always thought that was just the coolest thing ever. That, he was teaching in some other country with another language. And, it looked so cool seeing the pictures. And so I think that kind of put it in my head a little bit. At that age, like, oh, I'd love to do something like that one day. And then, of course, as I got older and we started traveling and coming to Europe every year, I was like, man, I really want, to do this, to be able to do this more than just a couple of times a year and just for a couple of weeks. Like, I love just like the European style of life and the look of everything in Europe. And so we kind of floated the idea around over the years, like, man, that'd be so cool if we could do that. And it was this summer when I finally was just like, yeah, I'm going to just throw out my application out there to as many schools as I can. I made a big list of countries that I would like to live or teach in and basically just fired off my CV and a cover letter to like, I think I did like 45 or 50 different schools.
Wow.
Like a buckshot method, I guess, of applying.
What was sort of top of the list in terms of places that you wanted to go to?
I guess probably my top 5 countries. I did a lot of Scandinavian countries just because I've always heard like they have such a good standard of living here. So Norway was up there, Sweden, of course, Finland, Denmark. And then I did like some more like mountainous places because, I'm into hiking. So I applied to some places in Switzerland and Austria. And, I applied in some like Eastern European countries as well because I thought maybe I'd have a better shot of getting into a place that's maybe a little less desirable to teachers. So I applied in Bosnia and Romania and some places like that.
Where would you say the weirdest place you applied was?
I don't know if it's really weird, but like Riga, Latvia was a place that was sort of intriguing to me.
Yeah, I mean, that'd be an interesting place to live for sure.
Yeah, and I'm kind of glad that one didn't pan out because I spoke to someone who lives here that used to live there actually, and they're like, "Oh yeah, it's a great place to visit, but it's horrible to live there. Like, it was such a poor country, and everyone's very unhappy there." So, good that one didn't work out.
And then what was it like? So you throw your resume out to like 45, 50 different places, and then you're just like waiting to hear back. What was that like? Like, what was that process like starting to hear back from places?
Yeah, so at around the same time that I was sending out my application, I also signed up for this recruiting agency, I guess you would call it. They're called Search Associates, and basically you pay a fee, and they help you in filling out your resume and getting it perfected. And then they basically have a big network with schools all around the world, and they'll help get you hooked up. So around the same time I was doing this, I was trying to cover my other bases by doing it in another way. In case my email method doesn't work, I've got this backup. And they host some job fairs and things like that. So I'm kind of waiting to hear on both ends. And I start getting a few answers back. The first one I got back was from Gothenburg, Sweden, which is on the opposite coast from where I'm at now. And the principal of that school wanted to set up an interview with me to start for this school year, like the beginning of this school year. And that kind of freaked me out a little bit because I was actually applying for the following school year. I was just a week away from starting, at my school here. I was like, well, I think it's too soon. Like, I'm already like ready to go for this school year. And so I turned it down. I said, thanks for the offer, but I was looking for something for next year.
So yeah, you were planning on going back in Houston and teaching there for the year, right?
Yeah. Basically, I was starting the process for the following year. It's like you give myself a year to get ready, get in my head the right way. So I turned it down, and then immediately I was like super bummed. Like I went out that day, I was like, oh my God, like I just turned down a job interview in Sweden. I was like, about it. And, so then a few days go by and, this one came up, an interview request. And I talked to my wife, Christina, about it a little bit. I was like, you know what? Like, I'm just going to go for it. And I didn't actually know that it was for this school year as well. So, I accepted the offer and I did the Skype interview. And this is actually, I'm a week into starting the school year already at this point. So, I've been getting my classroom all set up and everything's ready to go. And I do this interview and he tells me, we're looking to have you start in October. It's like, oh, okay. I didn't know we were looking to do it so soon. So, at that point, I spoke to my principal and told her what was going on. I told her, I'm doing an interview. I probably am not going to get the job because they're interviewing a few people for it, but I just wanted to give you a heads up that this is something I'm doing right now. So yeah.
How did she respond to that? Was it like positive or was it kind of?
Yeah, she like immediately like teared up and gave me a big hug and was like, yeah, this doesn't surprise me at all about you. And she was totally supportive about it. She said, if you need a reference or whatever, we'll support you 100% of the way in doing it. So she was super cool about it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And then what about the process? Like, what was the process like from there? So you do this first interview and then you hear back from the school and they want you on board. Is that kind of how that happened or?
Yeah, so I did an initial Skype interview with an academic manager there, and it went well. And he set up a second interview with me on Skype, and I did that. And at that point, he said, it was a good interview. We'll just confer and we'll let you know one way or the other. And then the next day, they offered me the job, and I didn't waste a second in accepting it. Super excited.
How did that feel? Were you at school when you found out?
No, because of the time difference, I sort of started getting used to communications at 3 or 4 in the morning. So it was super early when I got the email. It was a bit surreal, to get the offer, but really exciting. And there was no doubt in my mind that this was something we wanted to do.
Yeah, that's weird. I can really relate to that with my experience of going down to Atlanta, where it was kind of had these two options diverging, where it was I'm going to the airport. I don't know if the border guards are going to let me in because I have to apply for my visa right there. And I go, and then in my head, I'm thinking this is not going to happen. I'm going to go home. I'm not actually going to get a visa. But then I go and I get a visa, and a second later I'm on a plane. The next day I'm walking to work, and it just felt surreal for probably 48 hours. So I'm in Atlanta. Part of me didn't actually think it was going to happen, and it was there in front of me, and it's just such a weird feeling.
Yeah, definitely.
And then, so you get this job offer, you're like, oh my gosh, I am moving to Sweden. And we found out through your Facebook post, which was I think there must have been 100 comments on there of people who were like, oh my God, you're going to Sweden. So it's you're being supported by all these people online too, which is cool. And then you started applying for a visa to work there. Is that a complicated process?
Yeah. It really shouldn't be a complicated process. But what happened there? So, I get the offer, and basically our entire life is suddenly in upheaval. We've got to sell the house, we've got to sell the car, we can't bring any of our belongings with us. What do we keep? What do we not keep? Thinking of things like this. But in regards to the visa, the school basically does all that for you. They apply on your behalf. You basically just fill out this paperwork. You give them the power of attorney to do it for you, and then they take care of it. So it's basically just a waiting process from there. What I was told was it would be, could be anywhere from 2 weeks to a month, and that we should keep our fingers crossed that it's approved before my start date in early October.
It's September at this point, right?
Yeah.
And you're still working in Houston, just going to work at your school every day.
Yeah, exactly. So I put in my notice. I put in September 15th as my last day to work, so that I could have a little time to get my affairs in order, get everything sold that I needed to do, and be ready to go. So I leave my job on September 15th, and I'm waiting for the visa. And it's just taking a really long time. So I think this process drags into, maybe it was November. And I finally get word that a decision has been made on the visa. And once a decision gets made, you have to call your nearest Swedish embassy to get the decision. So I called the one in Washington, D.C., and she's like, oh, I'm sorry, it's been denied.
Oof.
Oh shit! But
now, so what's your headspace like when you hear that? Because you've been off of work now for weeks, sold all your stuff.
Yeah, so immediately I'm I think I totally have fucked my life completely. We've already moved out of the house. All of our stuff we've accumulated, we've sold. We're basically down to 5 boxes of our stuff. It's oh my God, it's all over. I don't know what happens now. Do I lose the job offer? So I get in communication with the school and to find out what happened. And it turns out the reason it was denied was in Europe, whenever there's a job offer posted for whether it's a teacher or anything, the job has to be advertised to citizens of the EU for 10 days before it can be, before someone, a non-EU citizen, can apply for the job. So it turns out, I guess through like a clerical error or something, the job had only been posted for 9 days instead of 10 before the interview. And so because of that one day, they had it. They're super like strict about the rules here.
That's so frustrating.
Yeah. So yeah, me like, okay, what next? Or is this thing still on? Can I still get there? And they're actually surprised that I'm willing to like stick it out again, to like go through it again. There's no way, I'm so far into it at this point, there's no way that I'm gonna give up. I mean, I've got nothing else to go on. So I'm like, yeah, we'll reapply. So they have to repost the job, wait 10 days, then, offer me the job again after the 10 days. And, for the second time, it actually went through, I think it only took maybe a week or 2 weeks. I mean, insanely fast the second time. So, yeah, that was really exciting when it finally happened.
And so then it's like December by this point when you've actually been accepted.
Yeah. Like the first week of December, I think it was.
Okay. And then you like immediately book a flight to Sweden and you're on your way?
Yeah. So I got the notice that the decision had been made on the visa on a weekend. It won't tell you if it's a good or bad decision. It just says a decision has been made. I was like, okay, it's gotta be like a positive decision this time. So I just booked a plane right then and there before I knew if it was a yes or a no. Like I'm just like, and like, cross my fingers that it's a good thing. But, yeah, so I called him on Monday and it was good to go. So
that's
awesome.
Then
I was on a plane.
Wow. What was it like kind of leaving Houston for, I guess, the time for quite a while, I think. You haven't been back since, have you?
No, I haven't.
So what was it like leaving? Because Christina stayed in Houston. You're gone for this year. What was that like?
It was quite nice, actually. I was ready to go. I never had much of a love of Houston or anything. It was just I've lived there most of my life, but it's just a nice place to live, but I didn't have a particular fondness for it, so I was quite happy to go. And at that point, I'd been so frustrated and just like ready to go for months and months and months that I was just like, good riddance. Yeah.
And then getting to Sweden, what was the first impression like?
So yeah, as we broke through the clouds and I saw like Sweden below me for the first time, it was just like this white, snowy wasteland. It's like, okay, here's my new home.
There's like a few White Walkers you can spot like by the wall.
Yeah. But it was, just such a whirlwind getting here. I didn't really have much time to think. I hit the ground running. I was super jet lagged and, I had to go pick up the keys to the apartment, which I didn't have any furniture for yet. So I was staying in a hotel for the first few weeks that I was here until I could get some furniture delivered from IKEA. And, basically took this apartment sight unseen because it's very hard to get a place here, to find a place. There's like a very high demand. So as soon as I found out that there was an apartment that I could stay in, I immediately, snapped it up without ever seeing a picture or anything.
And you're just outside of Stockholm, right?
Yeah, we're about an hour by train from Stockholm.
Okay.
Just to the west.
Is it kind of like a separate city, or is it in a lot of ways like a bit suburby and connected to Stockholm?
Yeah, it's really its own place. I guess the population, the town I live in is called Eskilstuna, and it's got a population of around 100,000, I think. So it's a pretty big city. So it's not, I don't think they would really consider it a suburb of Stockholm. But it's got similar styles of architecture, I guess. It's that very Scandinavian, like redwood buildings kind of look to it.
Yeah, we'll have to post some photos. It's been really cool seeing your photos there. I guess I'm curious, like, so Christina is coming over soon, isn't she?
Yeah, she comes in 2 weeks, a little less than 2 weeks.
And so between the time that you guys like left your house and it's sold now, right?
Yeah.
What were you guys like? Where were you guys staying? Did you guys just stay with friends, or has she found a different place?
Yeah, we stayed with her parents.
Okay.
Parents let us stay with them until we got everything situated. So she's still living with them, with the cats for now, and she'll be bringing them when she gets here.
Okay.
Oh,
cool.
that's awesome that you can bring the cats. Is that like a pretty easy process?
Not exactly. They have to, it's like a whole process. They have to get a microchip, and then they have to get like a rabies vaccination. And then they have to get a like health examination that has to be approved by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And then there's just like a small fee that they pay. But I think the biggest hassle is just going to be having cats on a plane for like 13 hours.
Yeah.
All by herself. She's responsible for 2 cats.
Yeah, well, my mom is actually going to come with her
Cool.
to help the cats, yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm sure it'll be nice to have Christina over there in Sweden with you.
Yeah. I'm really excited to get her, and she's like, can't wait to be here. Super excited.
Yeah.
Yeah. How is she? How did she feel about like the whole move? Since it was kind of like you got excited about getting a teaching job abroad, and then it's happening, but she's kind of like there beside you. How did she feel through the process?
She was good through the whole thing. This was sort of a joint decision that we both made, over many beers. Over the years, we've always talked about doing something like this. And so when I finally, decided that now was the time, she was totally on board with it too. She loves her job that she has, but she's not particularly married to the job. It's not like she's going to be super sad to leave, the company or anything like that. And I'm sure she'll find something to do here when she gets here. She'll probably work in the school that I'm at in some capacity, I think, eventually.
Awesome.
Cool. Yeah.
So what was the adjustment process like going from teaching in an American school to teaching in a Swedish school?
So the school I work at is a bit different from what I'm used to, but it's actually different from Swedish schools in general. So from what I understand, a normal public Swedish school is very, very laid back. Like students basically sit and play on their phones during class. They can show up whenever they want. If the teacher's sick or whatever, they just cancel class that day. They don't have a substitute in. So very laid back. They call their teacher by their first name instead of like Mr., Mrs. But at the school that I work for, I guess it's like a privately owned school, and the focus here is on like structure and order and like a very calm environment for the students to learn in. So here at my school, like the students, when they come in the morning, they're expected to be like totally silent, line up outside of your classroom, and then you invite them in and you say good morning to every student as they walk in. Good morning, good morning, good morning. And then they come in and they stand, and you walk in and you greet them, and then you invite them to sit down. Like it's super, super like orderly, which I guess the school that I came from, I wouldn't call it chaotic, but it wasn't so much focused on like these rules and expectations.
Has that been a hard adjustment for you as a teacher to kind of like switch your teaching style?
Yeah, it's definitely taking some getting used to. So I teach science as one of my subjects, and there's a lot of hands-on activities that we do. And when kids are playing around with lab equipment or doing a fun activity, it gets loud, and so I'm trying to find the balance, like, okay, we're not supposed to be loud, but how can you give a kid a handful of slime and, not expect excited about it? So, Yeah, right now I'm just trying to find the balance between doing fun things, but also maintaining that calm classroom environment. So sort of a balancing act.
Yeah, that sounds challenging for sure. I feel like finding the balance in general of kids, of like letting kids be kids, because it's like so joyful to see kids just being like free and laughing and stuff.
Yeah.
And like I hate the idea of crushing that out of them, but then also like there's some situations where you need to understand that that's like not appropriate behavior, I guess.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, a 10-year-old is a 10-year-old, and they're going to, no matter how many rules you put in place, they're going to get, wild and crazy every now and then.
Yeah.
Yeah. It seems like a cool look into another country's culture to be a teacher there. Because you get to like instead of like, maybe if you move to a different country and just start working at, Samsung or whatever, it's still this like, you're probably working with a lot of expats, and when you move as a teacher, you get to see all the kids and you get to see a different perspective than most travelers normally would.
Yeah, exactly. Because kids are so honest, and so you kind of get to see the real like culture through the kids, because they just tell it like it is, and you kind of see their way of life, and then interacting with the parents as well.
Yeah.
Has there been anything about Swedish culture that's really surprised you that you hadn't expected?
Yeah. Nothing really surprising. It's got its quirks and things. So like everywhere here, when you visit a place, you take a number instead of waiting in line. Like every place you go to has a little machine. When you walk, you just grab a number and then wait. I kind of learned that the hard way when I first got here. Set up a cell phone plan. I went into the cell phone store and walked up to the guy at the counter and was just standing in front of him waiting. He was just ignoring me, like totally ignoring me. Tapping away on his computer, wouldn't look at me. It's like, huh, okay. So like pull out my phone. I'm just like killing time, waiting for him to like get it. And then suddenly he like calls out a number, and someone just like butts in front of me. It's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's
like, I guess this works differently here.
Yeah. What else? So yeah, here there's something called they call it the personnummer. It's a personal number, and it's basically like the god of the country. The personal number, you cannot do anything without it. So sort of like a social security number, I guess. But without it, you can't have a gym membership, you can't have a bank account, you can't have a cell phone plan, you can't join like the grocery store club or whatever. Like you can do nothing without it. And it takes a really long time to get it. So I've been sort of like a ship without a sail since I've been here without my personal number. But I actually just got it last week. Yeah.
That's almost like a little bit like creepy.
What's that?
It's like a dystopian novel.
Yeah, exactly.
What are you doing here? Number 47? You should be at home right now.
But like you kind of had that experience going to the U.S. Like you couldn't get a bank account without a social security number, because we have social insurance numbers in Canada and they're not like interchangeable. They're two separate things between our countries. And it's like, oh, where's your social security number? It's like, oh, don't have a social security number yet. Okay, you can't open a bank account. You don't have a bank account. You can't get an apartment. And it's like, you don't have an apartment. You can't get a social security number. And it's like, something's got to give here.
Yeah, it's exactly the same here. It's like a catch-22. They're like, okay, to get an apartment, you have to have apartment insurance. But to have apartment insurance, you must have the personal number. It's like, well, I'm just moving here. I don't have it yet. Then you can't have the apartment.
So how did you work around that? Like, how were you able to get your apartment without your personal number?
So basically, like the employees at the school will help you. Like they'll put it in their name until you get your stuff sorted out. So they're really good about doing that for you at my school.
That's awesome. That's really good that they were able to help you. So I feel like that's like one of the biggest frustrations about moving somewhere new is trying to like navigate the different cultural things and get all your like personal accounts set up and kind of like make your life comfortable there.
Right. Yeah. The school here is super good about getting their new hires set up and integrated. They basically take care of all the hard work for you. basically just have you sign papers, and then they do it all for you.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So we kind of talked about a bit about like kind of small scale surprises, but how has it differed actually living in Sweden and teaching there? How has it differed than your expectation of it beforehand?
So, I don't know. I don't know that I really had too many expectations about it. It happened so quickly that, I'd never visited Sweden before. I really didn't even know much about Sweden. I just always heard that it was such a, sort of carefree society with a lot of good, like social, what's the word I'm looking for? Like plans, I guess, socialized healthcare, stuff like that. So I was really excited to experience all that kind of thing firsthand. And it's been really nice. I was able to utilize the healthcare system here. When I first got here, I got sick like right away. And yeah, it was totally free, which was crazy to me, to go to the doctor and not pay anything. But yeah, nothing has like been totally surprising or weird to me so far, I guess.
And how has it been just like meeting friends and like establishing a life for yourself there?
Yeah, so that's been going really well. The cool thing about working in an international school is, our staff is represented by so many different countries. To have like this super diverse group of friends that I'm making. I've got, South Africans and Canadians and Germans, and just very, very diverse group of people. And it's super cool to hang out with all these different cultures and stuff.
Cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. I imagine Sweden being like very like clean and orderly and just like very picturesque.
You just imagine it being like the societal version of an IKEA store.
And like, or kind of like the perfect snow globe. Like you look at it and you shake it and everyone's happy and stuff like that.
Yeah,
is that like what Sweden's actually like?
Yeah, I would say that's a pretty accurate picture. It's like immaculately clean here. I don't know, people like just walking down the street, like if a plastic bag blows by, like whoever walks by it just grabs it and like shoves it in their pocket to like take it to the nearest trash can.
That's the opposite of Bali.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're at a temple the other day and somebody like throws their garbage out of the window. Like, really? It's 2017. Is that okay?
They're like, oh, there must be a garbage pile forming here. Let me put my garbage on it.
No, let's light it on fire and destroy the ozone layer more.
They're super environmentally conscious here. Like taking out my trash now is like an exercise. Like I walk into the trash area. There's like 18 different types of recycle bins. There's like a separate bin for aluminum and a separate bin for, apple cores and a separate one for banana peels. Like it's not really that crazy, but, I'd say there's like 10 different like ways to recycle here.
Wow.
I mean, it's good. It's really good.
And then is there been much of a language barrier there, or for the most part, can you get by as like an English speaker?
Yeah, it's really easy to get by. I would say most people speak English. When you go to, a new country, usually it's just like the young people that can speak English and then the older people, not so much. But here, like everybody speaks English really well and they like speaking English. They like to be able to practice it. So, I'm still trying to learn Swedish, because my students are only learning English starting 2 years ago. And so they're still very weak in English, and I need to be able to, communicate better with them, I guess.
Yeah. What's it been like trying to learn Swedish so far?
I'd say it's a pretty easy language to learn. Like in Spanish and German, you have to conjugate the verbs and this and that. But in Swedish, you don't really do that so much. Like, for example, if you would have, like in English, you would say he is or you are. But in Swedish, like everything is just are, like I are, you are, we are, he are, she are. Like that's really easy.
Yeah, that's awesome.
How much teaching was a marketable skill in other countries? Like obviously you know that there's teachers everywhere and schools everywhere, but you kind of assume that I learned how to teach in the US, I've got to stay here. I learned how to teach in Canada, I've got to stay here. But it seems like there's a ton of options if you want to leave the country and go somewhere else.
Yeah, definitely. Especially here in Sweden, they have like a teacher shortage. So I think if you're a teacher with any level of experience, I think you've got a really good chance of getting a job here.
Yeah, that's cool to hear. I mean, for any Canadian teachers out there listening, like Canada has it's like the opposite. It's really hard to get a job as a teacher in Canada right now. There's tons of teachers who are just like sitting on sub lists, like waiting for jobs. So
yeah, that's what they're telling me. There's a huge number of Canadian teachers here at the school. So yeah.
Knowing what the process was like and how it's gone so far, do you kind of think back and say like, oh, maybe I could have done this earlier on in my career?
Yeah, for sure. So most of the teachers here, I'd say the majority of them are a lot younger than me. I'm not the old man on campus by any means, but sometimes it kind of feels that way because I'm like one of the only ones in my 30s. So I think like, man, if I had just done this sooner, like it's definitely something I would have been into to do it at a younger age, but I'm still pretty early on in my career. So I've got plenty of time to enjoy it. So
what kind of stood in your way? Was it something you were aware of and just kind of felt like wasn't a good time to do, or was it something you just really hadn't considered in the first 5 years of teaching?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's always kind of been there in the back of my mind, and I guess I never just found the motivation to really put myself out there and do it. It's like, maybe this is something I'm going to do in a few years. And then a few years go by and it's still like, one day I'm going to do this. And so it's just kept putting it off, I guess. And finally, I guess just boredom one day is like, I'm going to finally go for it.
Yeah. I think it's also a little bit harder too when you're in a partnership, like you're married. It's like you don't just make decisions just for yourself. Like, okay, I'm going to go teach in Sweden, or teach, wherever, like peace out. It's like you and Christina kind of have to decide those things together, which is, not always easy because it's hard to get work visas in other countries and you don't work in the same industry. So like it really did have to be a decision between two of you.
Yeah, definitely. And, the good thing about this school is, they like to have, if you have a boyfriend or a girlfriend or a wife or whatever, they like to get those people employed in some capacity in the school as well because they feel that it helps keep their employees there. You have more as like an investment in it. Okay? So I feel pretty confident that, she wants to take a little time off to just sort of enjoy the country, but I feel pretty confident that she can get a job in the school in some capacity.
Do you feel like you've had time to sort of explore Sweden a little bit so far, or has it just been so new that you've just been settling into a routine?
Yeah, it's mostly just been I just hit the ground running here, within a day of landing. I still hadn't caught up on jet lag. I was at the school, being shown around and given procedures and stuff. And it's every weekend I'm like, oh, this weekend I'm going to get on the train and, go check out, one of the surrounding villages or whatever. And I just haven't found the time to do it yet. With a new career, there's so much preparation I have to do. And things I think are going to start slowing down here. I'm starting to feel like I'm finding my feet a little bit at this point. Starting to get into my routines a little more. So I think I'll find a little more time to explore.
Yeah.
I did get to visit Stockholm a couple of times since I've been here, just for a quick couple of trips. But from what everybody tells me, they say just like wait until summer to really explore, because there's not so much to do in winter. Everything's just frozen and cold. Nobody wants to be outside too much. So I'm
going to a hockey game?
Up a little bit.
I just asked if you've been to a hockey game.
Yeah. No, but I'm sure that's in my near future. There's something called Bandy that's really popular here as well. I had never heard of that before. I had it explained to me the other day. It was a totally foreign concept.
Yeah, I don't know.
Should I know what Bandy is as a Canadian?
I don't know if it was you, Justin, but somehow on Facebook, I ended up on YouTube watching a "What is Bandy" video, and I was like watching all these clips of it. Yeah, freaky sport. It looks really cool though, because it's like it seems like hockey mixed with soccer. So it's way bigger field, way bigger nets, kind of a more like field hockey on ice, I think.
Wait, people run on ice?
No, they've got skates on.
Oh, okay.
But it's smaller sticks. Crazy. It's a ball, big field hockey like nets. But there's so much room to skate, which would make it quite fun. Whereas in like a standard hockey rink, you're kind of pinned in.
Never played a game of hockey.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. So that's very popular here. Soccer or football is super popular here as well. And it seems like the Canadian people here are really the ones that are so much into hockey. I don't know if I might be wrong on this, but I don't know if that's such a popular sport here.
I mean, the Swedish beat us in the World Juniors a couple of years ago, so.
Yeah, it seems like it's definitely like a football, just from the outside, like a football culture where like if there's a big hockey event happening, they can get like excited about it, but it's not like in Canada where it's like, this is the number one major sport that everyone has to be thinking about all the time.
Right.
What if there's people listening who are teachers who are interested in the idea of teaching abroad, what are some resources or recommendations you'd have for them to kind of start the process?
So yeah, like I mentioned earlier, I think that company Search Associates is a really great place to start. So it was, I paid $200, and for the $200, they give you, you fill out your resume. They give you a form to fill out, and they help you put your resume together, and they make it like look perfect to get you desirable. And then they give you access to like hundreds and hundreds of schools all around the world, their databases, so you can find out when they're hiring. They get you hooked up with job fairs. They hold a job fair every year in Toronto and Boston and San Francisco, London and Bangkok. And so you can get free access to go to those. And from what I understand, like people that go to those job fairs through Search Associates, like 90% of people like land a job.
Wow.
And I know that Europe is a bit harder to get into. I was sort of discouraged from even trying to get into Europe. They were saying, Asia or Africa is probably your best bet to start.
It's kind of like the pretty girl at the dance.
Yeah. Exactly.
Does that require more explanation? Yeah, that's where everybody wants to go. No one wants to go to Liberia.
Yeah.
At an inner school in Saudi Arabia, that's not on the top of people's list.
It would also sort of that I use, just like peppering the world with your resume, take a picture of yourself and slap it on a cover letter, and just I made myself a database. I made the list of countries I wanted to go to, and then I just went on Google and typed in international schools in Austria, and just like wrote down email addresses of the contacts in every international school I could find. And then once I had this big list, then, I just sent off that resume. I just, would change the word like, oh, I would love to work at blank school. Like I would just, change the wording every time and send it to the next person.
Yeah. That's key, making sure you've got like the right company written down.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure
you don't miss one somewhere in there.
Yeah, I'm sure at some point I sent I would love to work at your school in Sweden to one in Austria. I'm sure that.
Yeah, that's funny. And I think that's so something our two friends who teach at international school in Macau, when they went through that process, they had, they got pretty far in the interview process with a place in Jamaica, I think with a place in Saudi Arabia, and with a place in Macau. So it seems like a good idea to just keep your options open. Because a lot of ways having a really good school is going to define your experience more than being in the most glamorous destination.
Yeah, definitely.
So do you guys plan to spend a couple years in Sweden?
Yeah, we're actually hoping that it's like a permanent thing. A lot of the teachers at the school have been here for like over a decade.
Wow.
I kind of hope that's what happens with me. So we're going to live, in the apartment for a little while just to make sure that this is the right place for us and that we really want to do this. And after a couple years, if we're still happy, we'll, get a house or something and make it more of a permanent thing.
Is it a pretty clear path to permanent residency or to citizenship?
Yeah, it is. So if you are married to a Swede, or if you're dating, they call it like a sambo. If you're dating someone that lives here, you can get residency in 4 years. But like for me, if I'm not married to a Swede, I can get it in 5 years.
Okay. So it's only like a year longer.
And you just have to be there with a work visa in the period leading up to that?
Yeah, I believe so.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't know it was so easy to get permanent residency there.
Yeah, I guess maybe getting the work visa is a little bit challenging if you're not in a clearly defined field.
Yeah, I think so. Sweden is such an open country, though. They allow in so many immigrants and refugees that I think it's a bit easier to get here than it is in many other countries. Yeah,
I'm curious what your perspective has been being there, because I think if you turn on the news in North America recently, you kind of get this impression that like Europe is like on fire or something. It's just descending into chaos. Have you noticed anything changing in Sweden because of a lot of migrants coming in?
No, there's only been about 14 terrorist attacks since I've been here. No. Quite very safe. No, I think it's a bit overblown by the media about terrorism and danger with immigration over here. But I mean, you don't hear of any issues here in Sweden, I think even just over Europe as a whole, it's very, I don't think there's as many problems as they make it out to be.
Yeah. I mean, the stuff that does happens within certain communities, at least the frequent stuff.
Yeah, it's kind of always been like our outlook on, if we hear something on mainstream media on it, it's kind of like a one-off event or like a terrorist attack or something. It's not something that's going to necessarily hold us back from going somewhere.
Yeah. I remember we talked on the podcast about this before, but right before we went to the Philippines, there was a news story about 2 Canadians getting beheaded there, kidnapped and beheaded. And we were like talking to my dad, and we're like, "Oh yeah, we're going to start in the Philippines." And he's like, "Oh yeah, I just heard that Canadians get beheaded there."
Like as if every Canadian who goes to the Philippines gets kidnapped and beheaded. It's like you're in
the immigration line, and they're like, "Oh, Canadians, you go over there, and
we're going to go chop off your head."
A rite of passage. People will take these, one-off events and just sort of make it into a blanket thing, like, Europe is just this seething terrorist hot pot right now because they're allowing immigrants from Muslim countries in. And yeah, there's a lot of fear mongering, I think, that goes on about it. So yeah, in Europe as a whole, I think there's sort of like a whole, the population is sort of divided on the immigrant thing. But I think in Sweden, they don't tend to have that so much. I think people in general are very supportive of the immigration that happens here. It's a very, very welcoming country.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's definitely on my list of places to visit for sure. I would love to go there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Probably in the summer though.
Yeah, summer.
Definitely in the summer.
Because it's mostly, it's dark for a lot of the time in the winter, isn't it? Because it's more it's like the northern part of Canada.
Yeah, exactly. So we're at a point now where it's starting to get more normalized daylight hours that I'm used to. But once we hit the summer, it'll be like in northern Canada where like the sun sets at midnight.
Cool. Yeah.
Really
looking forward to that. Yeah, you get like the summer kind of like pays off, I guess, but then you kind of like suffer through the winter a little bit through like cold, dark days.
Yeah. I've been having to take B12 vitamins every day since I don't get it, or not B12, but vitamin D, the one you get from the sun. I have to take those tablets every day.
Yeah, that's such a massive difference from Texas too.
Yeah, I hadn't taken my vitamin D in a while, and one morning I got up and I had like these dark circles around my eyes, and like my whole face just kind of looked sunken in. I'm like, oh my god, like I haven't seen the sun in so long. I'm starting to feel the effects of it. Yeah,
it's a funny feeling where it's like, I always felt like in Calgary, I didn't really notice that it had happened until I saw the sun again. It would be like, the first time in 3 weeks that the sun's out and it's not gray and cold, and you're like, wow, I feel really happy today. And then you're like, oh, I've been quite depressed for the past few weeks.
Yeah, they definitely talk about the winter doldrums here a lot with how dark it is and it's overcast so much, but we're finally starting to emerge from that dark period and into a more sunny, warmer time, I guess.
Yeah. No, that's great.
Awesome.
Yeah, it'll be awesome to see your photos as like you get to spend more of the seasons there.
Really excited to explore more of it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for talking with us again, Justin. We'll have to continue this tradition of where in the world is Justin in the future. So if you guys want to follow more of Justin's stuff, justingoesplaces.com. And where else can people get in touch with you, Justin?
I'm on Instagram as Justin Goes Places and Facebook as Justin Goes Places as well. So.
And if someone is a teacher in the U.S. and they're curious about teaching abroad, would it be all right if they reached out to you to ask you questions about that? Yeah, that would be awesome. I'd be happy to do it. So if anyone wants any advice or anything like that, you can just send me a friend request on Facebook and we can chat on there.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
To find more information, relevant links, and photos talked about in this week's episode, check out theworldwanderers.com.
If you have a question, comment, or feedback, send us an email at info@theworldwanderers.com. Join our community on Facebook at The World Wanderers or on Twitter at World Wanderers 1. As always, thanks so much for listening.
Have a great day.
Bye.